The phone call, no one expected it, was just another bright morning in Los Angeles. No. The sun poured through Keanu Reeves' kitchen window as he quietly made his tea, wearing the same old t-shirt he had owned for years. No press, no cameras, no noise. Just peace. He liked it that way. But today, everything was about to change. His phone rang. It was his agent, sounding more excited than usual. "Keanu, it's big," he said. "They're rebooting Time Wave, the film you once said you'd only return to if the story had heart." Keanu's eyes narrowed. Time Wave had been his breakout sci-fi drama decades ago. They wanted him again? "They want you as the lead," his agent continued. "But here's the catch. They're planning to cast a much younger female co-star, someone trendy, someone social media loves. They'll send you the shortlist."
Keanu?
Didn't answer right away, just stared at the rising steam from his cup. He remembered the original Time Wave, not the fame, not the awards, but one person, Sandra Bullock. They had worked together on that very film when their careers were still young. She was thoughtful, driven, and never acted like she was above anyone. In a world full of glitter, she was grounded. Real later that afternoon, Keanu sat in his backyard. The wind moved softly through the trees as he opened the studio's email. There were 10 names. All were talented, all were young, all were trending. He read the names one by one, then closed the laptop. He picked up his old flip phone. It still had Sandra's number saved. He hesitated for a second, then called. On the other side of town, Sandra Bullock was sitting in her quiet garden, wearing no makeup and holding a paperback novel. Her life had slowed down. She liked it that way. She had stepped back from Hollywood to raise her kids, to breathe, to heal from past pain. Fame had given her much, but also taken more than anyone knew. Her phone buzzed. "Keanu?" "Hey," said, surprised. His voice came softly through the speaker. "I have a question," he said, without any small talk. "Okay." She smiled. "If there was one more film," Keanu said slowly, "one that meant something, would you do it with me?" She was quiet. The silence stretched. Birds chirped. In the background, she felt her heart beat just a little faster. "What's the catch?" she asked finally. Keanu laughed gently. "You just have to say yes." The next day, Keanu walked into the studio's conference room. 10 executives were waiting. The producer smiled and pushed a folder toward him. "Here are the final choices for your co-lead," he said. "We narrowed it down to influencers and rising stars under 30. This film is going global. We want buzz." Keanu didn't even open the folder. "I've already made my choice," he said calmly. The room shifted. The producer blinked. "You have?" Keanu nodded. "I want Sandra Bullock." They looked at each other. Some tried to hide their surprise. One executive spoke up, careful with his words. "She's older now, Keanu, but you're sure the audience will connect with?" That, Keanu's voice didn't rise. It never needed to. "They will," he said, "because truth doesn't age, and neither does talent. This isn't just a film. It's about what it means to stand still when the world changes. No one understands that better than her." The room fell silent. He stood. "Either it's Sandra, or it's not me." And then he walked out. Sandra got the official call that evening. Her hands trembled slightly as she listened. When she hung up, she just sat on the floor and stared ahead, quietly overwhelmed. No agent had called her in years. No director had asked for her. No producer had waited, but Keanu did. Tears welled in her eyes. Not because it was a big role, but because someone remembered her. Someone saw her and chose her. Without hesitation, whispers in the hallway in the first day of rehearsals, Sandra arrived early. She wore a soft gray sweater and simple jeans. No makeup, no stylist. She walked in quietly, holding a warm cup of coffee in both hands, almost as if she wanted to disappear into the walls. But the moment she stepped through the studio entrance, everything stopped. 2 young assistants standing by the front desk paused their conversation. "Is that?" one whispered. "Yeah," the other replied. "She looks different, older?" Sandra heard them. She smiled politely and walked past without saying a word. Inside, a few of the new cast members were gathered. They were excited, fresh from shows and viral videos, chatting about deals, followers, and trending hashtags. They barely looked up when she entered. She sat quietly in the back corner of the room, taking out her notes and reading through the script. No one said hello. Not yet. Keanu walked in 15 minutes later, his motorcycle helmet still in hand. He wore the same black boots he'd worn on John Wick, spotted Sandra immediately and smiled. "Hey," he said, walking up to her. "Hey," she replied softly. He looked around the room. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, just a bit of dust in the air." He knew what that meant. He could feel it too, the unspoken age gap, the subtle stares, the doubt hanging in the air like smoke. But he also knew something else. He walked to the center of the room, greeted the director, then turned back and raised his voice slightly. "Before we begin," he said, "I just want to say something." Everyone turned to look. This story we're telling, it's about strength, time, and what we hold on to when everything around us changes. And there's only one person who could play this role. Not because of her past, but because of her heart. He pointed toward the back of the room. Sandra is the soul of this film. If you want to learn something real, watch her. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, a few clapped. A few nodded, and the room began to shift. During their first table read, Sandra's voice trembled slightly on the first few lines. Not because she forgot, but because she cared. Her eyes stayed on the words. Her hand gripped the edge of the table. Then Keanu placed his hand gently on hers under the table. No one saw it, but she felt it, and she kept going. By the end of the scene, her voice had settled. Her eyes had lit up. Something had returned not from memory, but from deep inside her. When she finished, there was silence again. This time, not because they doubted her, but because they didn't expect to feel so much. The youngest actor in the group, a 24-year-old who had just starred in a hit drama, leaned toward her and whispered, "That was incredible." Sandra looked at him and smiled. "Thank you. I'm still learning." The boy stared at her, surprised. He thought she was being humble. He didn't know she meant it. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Sandra stayed behind. Slowly packing her bag, the director walked in, surprised to see her. "You're still here?" he asked. "Just wanted a quiet moment," she replied. He sat down beside her. "They didn't want you, you know," he said bluntly. "Not at first. Everyone thought Keanu was being nostalgic." "And now?" she asked. He smiled. "Now they're scared." "Of what?" "Of how good you still are." Sandra didn't say anything, but inside her chest, something she thought had died long ago began to breathe again. Outside the studio, Keanu was waiting. He stood by his motorcycle, looking up at the night sky. When she stepped out, he handed her a helmet. "Ride with me?" he asked. She laughed softly, just like old times. "No," he said, "better." She climbed on behind him, holding him tight as the wind swept around them. And for the first time in years, Sandra Bullock smiled not because someone asked her to, but because her heart finally felt seen again. The press conference studio had planned everything carefully. The marketing team said it was time to reveal the cast to the world. Posters were being printed, interviews were scheduled, reporters were invited from all over. There were banners, cameras, bright lights, and a very long table with name cards, microphones, and little bottles of water. Keanu and Sandra were seated in the center. Keanu wore black. As always, calm, quiet, thoughtful. Sandra wore a dark blue dress. Minimal makeup. It's just enough to be polite. But behind her eyes, she felt the pressure pressing in like a wave. This was the part she feared. Not acting, not storytelling, but being judged by the world before she even spoke. The first few questions were safe. Double quotes Keanu. "What drew you back to this role after all these years?" "Sandra, how did it feel to be reunited?" But then it changed. A young reporter from a rising entertainment blog stood up. He didn't smile. Didn't even look at Sandra. Keanu, he said, was there pressure from the studio to choose someone younger as your co-star? The air tightened. Sandra felt her shoulders freeze. Her hands dropped under the table. The director looked down. Even the camera crew paused. But Keanu didn't flinch. He leaned forward, took a breath, and spoke slowly. Yes, he said. A few heads turned. I was given options. Talented people, new faces. But when I read the final script, when I reached the final scene, there was only one person in my mind. He turned to Sandra. Her, the reporter, didn't give up. But aren't you worried about how the audience will react? Times have changed. Viewers want truth. Keanu interrupted. Viewers want truth? His voice was low, but firm. And if truth comes with a few wrinkles, or a softer voice, or wiser eyes, then maybe that's exactly what we need right now. The room went quiet. Sandra didn't speak. She couldn't. Her eyes were glassy. Her heart was pounding. But not from fear this time. From something stronger. Gratitude. After the conference, the clip of Keanu's response went viral. Millions watched it in just one day. Some headlines read, Keanu defends Sandra in the most powerful way he didn't. Choose fame. He chose loyalty. This is why we love Keanu Reeves in the comments. Something unusual happened. People weren't arguing. They weren't tearing anyone down. They were remembering speed, the lake house, gravity. Remembering how Sandra made them feel. Long before social media chose the rules, comments poured in like waves. She still got it. I'd watch her read a phone book. No and Sandra together again. Take my money. Inside her apartment. Sandra sat on the floor with her son beside her. They scrolled through the messages. Together he looked at her with wide eyes. Mom, they love you. She smiled. No, sweetheart, they remembered me. That's different. He hugged her tightly, and for a moment she wasn't an actress. She was just a mom, holding her child. Realizing that being seen didn't require being perfect. A week later, the crew moved to the filming location, a quiet, desert town, far from the city lights. The real work was about to begin, but something was different now. When Sandra walked onto the set, the whispers were gone. The stares had changed. People stood up. They nodded. They made space, and in their eyes was respect, not just for what she had done before, but for what she was about to do again. She broke down between Takesti. Desert was silent. Wide skies. Dry wind. Red soil that cracked under every footstep. The scene they were filming was heavy, the turning point in the story. Sandra's character had to say goodbye to the one person she loved most, not with words, not with tears. Just silence and a long walk into the distance. The camera was ready. The crew stood still. Sandra stepped into position. She closed her eyes. She breathed in deep, and when the director called action, she started walking. Her shoulders curled in. Her eyes stared forward, and every step felt like she was leaving a part of herself behind. Keanu watched from the monitor, not blinking. The time she reached the top of the hill, no one on set moved. It wasn't just a scene. It was pain. Real, raw, familiar. When the director yelled, "Cut," Sandra didn't turn back. She kept walking past the cameras, past the cables, past the crew, until she reached the side of a trailer and sat down behind it, away from everyone. Her hands were shaking. She pulled her knees to her chest and stared at the ground. She didn't cry like in the movies. No. Sound, just silent waves crashing inside Keanu. Saw her disappear and followed. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat beside her in the dust. Minutes passed. Then she whispered, "I didn't expect it to hurt like that." He looked at her. Gently. "What part?" She took a long breath, being forgotten. And then remembered. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't rush her. He just said, "You never left." The world just looked away for a while. Her lip trembled. She finally looked at him. "Why did you really choose me, Keanu?" He thought for a moment, then answered, "Because you don't pretend." The next day, the scene was played back in the editing tent. Even the editor had to pause halfway through. "It's not acting," he said quietly. "It's truth," the director nodded. We only get 1 or 2 performances like that in a lifetime, he whispered. This is one of them. The crew started talking, but this time the whispers were different. She's not just back, someone said. She's better. That evening, a few of the younger actors gathered around the fire pit near the trailers. Someone was playing guitar. Others were laughing, trading stories from past sets. When Sandra walked past, they called out to her. Sandra, come sit. She paused, unsure, but they insisted. They made room, and when she sat down, something beautiful happened. They didn't ask her about fame. They didn't ask her about old movies. They just listened. She talked about failure, about learning, about raising children and losing friends, about how Hollywood teaches you to smile even when your heart is breaking, and they listened like she was a lighthouse dot, a guide in a storm they hadn't. Reached yet? One young woman looked at her with wide eyes and said, You make me feel like it's okay not to be perfect. Sandra smiled. It is, she said. Just don't let anyone rush your journey. Keanu watched from a distance. He didn't interrupt. He didn't join. He just smiled, because this right here was why he had chosen her. Not because she was a name, but because she was a mirror showing everyone who they really were and who they could still become. The scene that changed everything, the final scene of the movie, was the most difficult. It wasn't loud. There were no explosions, no stunts. Just 2 people standing at the edge of time, facing each other after everything had been lost. The script had only one line, and it belonged to Sandra. But her eyes had to say everything else. Grief, love, forgiveness, strength. On the day of the shoot, the crew was silent. Even the weather felt heavy. The clouds hung low over the desert sky, casting soft shadows across the dusty ground. Keanu stood across from her, waiting. He looked into her eyes, and for a moment, he wasn't acting. He was just there, watching the woman who had always made him feel safe. The cameras rolled, and Sandra stepped forward. She opened her mouth, but no words came instead. Her eyes filled with tears, her lips trembled, and she collapsed into Keanu's arms. Not because she forgot the line, but because something deeper was happening. The director rushed forward. Cut. Cut. But Keanu held up a hand. No, he said quietly.
Out.
Keep rolling. He looked at Sandra. She was trying to breathe. Her chest was rising fast. Her eyes stared straight ahead, not at him, but through him. As if she was seeing every memory she had buried, Keanu whispered, Say it. Just say what's true. And with tears running down her face, Sandra whispered the only words she could. You never stopped believing in me. The cameras caught it, raw, unfiltered, unrehearsed, and perfect. The director didn't speak. Neither did the crew. They knew what they had captured. Not a scene, a moment, a truth that night. The entire cast and crew gathered for an early screening. The studio sent early feedback. Test audiences had responded with standing ovations. People cried, people cheered, but most of all, they felt something. And in the middle of that crowded screening room, while the final scene played, you could hear only one thing: silence. A quiet that wrapped itself around everyone as Sandra stood on screen, her face filled with years of emotion and love and pain, all in a single look, when the credits rolled. No one clapped right away. They sat in stillness. Some wiped tears, others just stared. And then, applause, not the kind you hear after a blockbuster. This was slower, deeper, earned. Sandra stepped outside the theater, so overwhelmed. She needed air. She stood by the edge of the parking lot. Under a streetlight, breathing in the cool night wind, Keanu found her a few minutes later. How are you feeling? He asked. She looked at him, her voice small, scared. Why? Because I gave them everything, and I don't know if it's enough. Keanu stepped closer. You gave them something better than enough, he said. You gave them real.
Oh, real.
Isn't always what they want, but it's what they need. The next morning, her phone rang again. It wasn't the studio. It wasn't her agent. It was her mother's old friend. Someone who hadn't called in years. I saw your scene, the woman said. I saw you, really saw you. And one by one, calls started coming in from people who didn't care about ratings, from people who felt broken, people who were lonely, people who thought they were too old, too late, too invisible. They all said the same thing. Thank you for reminding me I still matter. And that night, Sandra Bullock sat in her room, alone. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, she didn't see a star. She didn't see someone famous. She saw a woman who had survived, who had stumbled, but who chose to rise again. And somewhere, deep inside, the voice of her younger self whispered one thing: "You're not done yet." The standing ovationth day of the premiere arrived. The red carpet stretched long under the bright lights. Fans gathered behind barricades, screaming the names of stars. Flashes from cameras lit up the sky like lightning. Reporters held microphones. Influencers posed for photos. Stylists adjusted gowns and tuxedos. And then quietly, a black car pulled up. Sandra Bullock stepped out, no glitter. No show, just grace. She wore a soft ivory dress, no diamonds, no bold colors. Just her. At first, some people didn't recognize her. But when they did, the crowd began to shift. A few gasps, then clapping, then cheering. She smiled, touched her heart gently, and walked forward. Not for fame, not for cameras, but for something far more personal. This moment was hers. Earned, not given. Keanu walked beside her, calm and strong. He didn't walk ahead. He didn't try to outshine her. Simply matched her steps exactly as he had always done. Reporters rushed forward. "Keanu, was this a risk?" He answered without pause. "It was a gift. Sandra, how does it feel to be back?" She looked out at the crowd, at the people who had grown up watching her, then said simply, "I never left. I just needed to be seen again." Inside the theater, the energy was electric. This was the film people didn't expect. No superheroes, no explosions, just heart as the movie played. The audience sat motionless, and when that final scene came, the one where Sandra whispered those words with tears in her eyes, the theater changed. You could hear people crying, not loud sobs, but soft, silent tears, because they saw themselves in her, the forgotten, the overlooked, the ones who thought their time had passed. And then, the screen faded to black, the credits rolled, no one moved. And then, as if pulled by one shared breath, the entire audience stood, a standing ovation. Not for the movie, for the woman, for her truth, for her courage, for her return. Backstage, Sandra sat in a small green room, holding a glass of water. Her hands were shaking again, not from nerves, but from the weight of it all. Keanu entered. He didn't speak. He just hugged her tightly for a long time. And then he whispered the words that meant more than any award. "I'm proud of you." She held onto him and whispered back, "Thank you for not forgetting me." Months later, the film was nominated for awards. Sandra's name was everywhere again, not in gossip headlines, but in words like timeless, powerful, honest. One critic wrote, "In an industry obsessed with youth, it was an older actress who gave us the most human performance of the year." Another wrote, "Keanu didn't just cast a co-star. He reminded the world what dignity looks like." But for Sandra, the awards didn't matter most. What mattered was the letter she received one morning from a woman in her 60s. It read, "Dear Sandra, I watched your film. I cried all the way through, not because of the story, but because of you. I had stopped believing I could begin again. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to be seen." Sandra folded the letter gently and kept it on her nightstand, right beside a photo of her and Keanu taken on set. Both smiling, both changed, both home and somewhere deep in the world. Someone watched that film, someone who felt forgotten and whispered, "Maybe I'm not done either."